back to 65. Myself Srija. So today in this session you are going to learn about the anatomy and physiology of inner ear. So what is inner ear? So in the previous session you have learnt about the external ear and also about the middle ear. So coming to inner ear, it is also called as labyrinth. So it is the deepest part of the ear. It lies inside the petrous part of the temporal bone, which is one of the hardest bones in the body. So the inner ear, it performs two major sensory functions. So what are those two sensory functions? Hearing. So hearing, this function is carried out by the cochlea. What is cochlea? It is a spiral shaped organ that converts the sound vibrations into electrical signals for the brain. So how does the hearing works in the inner ear? So first, the sound waves reach the cochlea through the middle ear bones. So inside the cochlea, there is a special fluid called as endolymph that moves when sound vibrations enter. So this fluid movement bends tiny hair cells that generate the nerve impulses. So next, these impulses, they travel through the 8th cranial nerve, which is called as vestibulocochlear nerve, to the brain. So this is the first sensory function. So the second sensory function is balance and spatial orientation via the vestibular system. So this is handled by the vestibular system, which includes both the semicircular canals and also the utricle and saccule. So what are semicircular canals? They detect the rotational movements of the head turning side to side. Whereas utricle and saccule, they detect the linear movements up, down and forward, backward and also the head position. So now how the balance works within the inner ear. So these semicircular canals or semicircular ducts, they are filled with the fluid called as endolymph. So when the head moves, the fluid also moves within the inner ear. So this movement, it bends the sensory hair cells located in the cristae inside the ampullae. So the utricle and saccule, they contain the otoliths, which are the tiny crystals that shift with the head movement, stimulating the hair cells. So these signals, they go to the brain to help to maintain the balance and posture. So there are two labyrinths of the inner ear. The one is bony labyrinth, which is the outer hard shell, and the other is the membranous labyrinth, which is the inner delicate system. So bony labyrinth, which is shown in the blue color within the picture. So this is a rigid protective cavity which is inside the skull. It contains cochlea, vestibule and also a semicircular canals. So the fluid inside the bony labyrinth is called as perilymph. So what does this bony labyrinth do? It provides the protection for delicate sensory structures. It also acts as a support framework. So next is membranous labyrinth. This is shown as purple color within the picture. So this lies inside the bony labyrinth and it contains sensory receptors. So it has delicate sacs and ducts. So what does it has? Cochlear duct for hearing, utricle and saccule and also the semicircular duct. So the fluid inside the membranous labyrinth is called as endolymph. So endolymph, it has a special ionic composition which are critical for hair cell activation. So this system, it is responsible for actual detection of the sound and movement. So what is the fluid system of the inner ear? So the two labyrinths have different fluids. One is perilymph, which is in the bony labyrinth, and the other is endolymph, which is in the membranous labyrinth. So the perilymph with the bony labyrinth, it is similar to the cerebrospinal fluid which is present in the brain. So this protects and cushions the membranous labyrinth. Whereas endolymph, it has high potassium concentration. It is critical for converting mechanical vibrations within the nerve signals for sensory transduction. So in this diagram, you can clearly see this is the outer ear canal which is connected to the middle ear. So the inner region is a semicircular ducts, you can see, which are labeled anterior, lateral, posterior. So these are the semicircular ducts. So coming to utricle and saccule, these are present within the vestibule. And the cochlea with its three ducts called as vestibular duct, cochlear duct and tympanic duct. So blue indicates the bony labyrinth and purple indicates the membranous labyrinth. So this helps you to distinguish between the difference between two layers. So next is coming to anatomy of the inner ear. So the first part is bony labyrinth. So inner ear has two parts. The one is bony labyrinth, which is the outer hard shell, and membranous labyrinth, soft inner system. So what is bony labyrinth? It is a set of interconnected hollow cavities which are located deep inside the temporal bone. So it forms a protective outer casing for the delicate organs of hearing and balance. So this bony labyrinth, it has three major components. What are those? Cochlea, vestibule and semicircular canals. So cochlea, it looks like snail shape which is shown in the picture. So this makes 2.5 turns around a certain bony axis called as modulus. So what is the function of the cochlea? It is responsible for hearing. It converts the sound vibrations into the nerve signals. So inside the bony cochlea, there are three canals. The scala vestibuli, scala tympani and cochlea duct. Scala vestibuli, it is filled with the perilymph, and scala tympani, it is also filled with perilymph, whereas cochlea duct, it is a part of a membranous labyrinth which is filled with the endolymph. So these channels, they help to detect the different sound frequencies. So next part is vestibule. So vestibule, it lies between the cochlea and the semicircular canals. So what is the function of the vestibule? It acts as a central chamber that connects the hearing and also the balance organs. So it contains two important membranous structures called as utricle and saccule. So this detects the linear movements up, down, forward to backward and the head position relative to the gravity. So what are the openings in the vestibule? You have the round window and oval window. So round window, it relieves the pressure inside the cochlea, whereas oval window, where Stapes footplate sits, it begins the hearing pathway. So this is about the vestibule. So next, coming to the third component, semicircular canals. So what are semicircular canals? There are three semicircular canals which are arranged at right angles like a 3D gyroscope, like superior canal, posterior canal and also the lateral canal. So what does these semicircular canals do? They detect the rotational head movements like turning, spinning, nodding, etc. So each canal has a swollen end called as ampulla, which contains the crista ampullaris, which is a sensory organ for the rotational balance. Now, in this picture, you can see both bony labyrinth and membranous labyrinth. So coming to bony labyrinth picture, it shows the outer rigid structure. So what does it include? Semicircular canals which has superior, posterior, lateral layers, and cochlea, here it is, and vestibule, and within the vestibule you find the oval window and round window, and also the recess for utricle and saccule, and the end ampulla which is swollen end of the canals. So in the membranous labyrinth, this represents the soft ducts and sacs which are inside the bony labyrinth. So semicircular ducts within the canals and utricle and saccule, these are present inside the vestibule, cochlear duct inside the cochlea, and endolymphic sac and duct, and the final one is the ductus reunions which connects saccule to the cochlear duct. So what is the key difference between bony labyrinth and membranous labyrinth? Bony labyrinth, it is filled with perilymph, whereas membranous labyrinth, it is filled with endolymph. So this is the main difference between these two layers of the inner ear. So the inner ear, it has three semicircular canals arranged at 90 degrees angle for each other like a 3D gyroscope. So this arrangement, it helps to detect the head movement in all the directions. I already said you, there are three canals within the semicircular canals. The anterior one, superior, posterior canal and lateral canal. So this anterior canal, it detects the forward or backward head movement. So posterior canal, it detects the tilting of the head towards the shoulder. Whereas lateral canal, it detects side to side rotation. So what is the function of these canals? These canals, they detect the rotational movements of the head. So now how the rotation is detected? So each canal has an enlarged area called as the ampulla. So inside each ampulla, there is a structure called crista ampullaris, which is containing the hair cells. So whenever the head rotates, the endolymph fluid, it lags behind bending the hair cells. So this bending, it generates the nerve impulses that travel through the vestibular nerve to the brain. So what is the fluid in the bony labyrinth? It is perilymph. So this bony semicircular canals, they contain the perilymph. So this perilymph, it is similar to the extracellular fluid. So this perilymph, it is high in the sodium content and low in the potassium content. So it also protects and supports the membranous ducts inside. So this is about the bony labyrinth, and the second part is membranous labyrinth. So what is membranous labyrinth? It is a delicate inner tube system that lies inside the bony labyrinth. So it contains the actual sensory organs which are responsible for hearing and balance. So what are the key features of this layer? It is a continuous system of tubes and sacs. It is suspended within the perilymph and also filled with the endolymph. So what are the characteristics of the endolymph? It is high in potassium content and low in sodium content. It is vice versa of the perilymph. So this is similar to the intracellular fluid, while perilymph is similar to the extracellular fluid. So this is also essential for the activation of the hair cells, which are the sensory receptors. So what are the components of the membranous labyrinth? Cochlear duct is the first component, which is also called as the scala media. So this cochlear duct, it is a membranous tube inside the cochlea. So this plays a central role in the hearing. So cochlear duct, it contains the organ of Corti. So this organ of Corti, it is a main hearing receptor organ. So it contains the inner and outer hair cells, the tectorial membrane, and the nerve fibers of the cochlear nerve. So these structures, they convert the sound vibrations into electrical signals. So now how the cochlear duct divides the cochlea? So the presence of the cochlear duct, it creates three chambers: scala vestibuli, scala media, and scala tympani. So this scala vestibuli, it contains the perilymph, whereas scala media, it contains the endolymph. And coming to scala tympani, it contains the perilymph. So what is the pathway of the sound through this chamber? So sound enters via the oval window, which is a scala vestibuli. It travels up to the spiral. It passes through the helicotrema. It returns in the scala tympani to the round window. So the movement of endolymph inside the cochlear duct, it stimulates the organ of Corti. So why is cochlea is spiral shaped? Because to increase the surface area for different sound frequencies, which is high pitch at base and low pitch at apex. So this vestibular part of the inner ear, it helps with the balance, posture and spatial orientation. So it consists of utricle, saccule and also about the semicircular ducts, each containing the special sensory organs. So what are the special sensory organs? Utricle and saccule and also the semicircular ducts. So what are utricle and saccule? So these are the otolith organs which are located in the vestibule. So what is the function of this utricle and saccule? They detect gravity, nothing but the static equilibrium. So they help in the linear acceleration. For example, like riding in an elevator, up and down, moving in a car, forward and backward. So it contains about the maculae. So what is maculae? Both utricle and saccule contain maculae, which are the sensory patches with the hair cells. So this is covered by a gelatinous layer topped with the otoliths. So otoliths are nothing but they are the tiny calcium carbonate crystals. So how they work? When the head tilts or accelerates, these otoliths move, this bends the hair cells, and these are the signals which are sent to the vestibular nerve. So next is semicircular ducts. So these ducts, they are inside the bony semicircular canals and these are filled with the endolymph. So what is the function of semicircular ducts? They detect the rotational head movements such as turning the head to left or right, nodding the head and also tilting the head. So the next part in the semicircular ducts is ampullae. So at the base of each duct, there is a swollen area called as ampulla. So inside each ampulla, there is a crista ampullaris. I have already discussed this before in the first slide even. Crista ampullaris, it is a sensory receptor for a rotational movements. So now how this crista ampullaris works? So head rotates, then endolymph lags behind. So cupula bends and then hair cells bend. So vestibular nerve, it carries signals to the brain. So now moving to the main part of this slide. So what are the detailed structures in the anatomy? The cochlea, which is a hearing organ. So cochlea, it is the most important structure for hearing. So this is the internal anatomy of cochlea. The first part of cochlea is modulus. So modulus is nothing but it is a central bony core of the cochlea. And the spirals of the cochlea wrap around this central pillar. So the houses blood vessels, spiral ganglia neurons, these carry sound signals to the brain. So the second part is spiral laminae. So this is a bony shelf extending outward from the modulus. So it also supports the organ of Carty. It helps to divide the cochlear structure into its three chambers called as scalae. So this is like a platform inside the spiral staircase. So what are the three scalae of the cochlea? Cochlea has three fluid-filled chambers which are called as scalae, scala vestibuli, scala tympani and scala media. So scala vestibuli, it is the upper chamber filled with perilymph. It begins near the oval window. It carries the sound waves from the middle ear upward through the cochlea. Whereas scala tympani, it is a lower chamber. It is also filled with the perilymph. It ends at the round window. Vestibule at oval window, tympani at round window. So this also carries the sound waves downward back to the base of the cochlea. And the third one is scala media. So this is the part of membranous labyrinth, which is also called as the cochlear duct, which is filled with the endolymph. So this contains the organ of Carty, which is a true hearing receptor. So in the previous slide, there is a diagram which shows a cross section through the cochlea. So the top chamber is scala vestibule, which is filled with perilymph, and the middle chamber is scala tympani, the perilymph, and the middle one is it is scala media, which is a cochlear duct. So other labels are the resinous membrane, which forms this roof of scala media, and the bottom chamber it is basilar membrane, which supports the organ of Carty, and stria vascularis, it produces endolymph. Osseous spiral lamina, it is a bony shelf again. Spiral ganglion, it is a nerve cell bodies, it consists of nerve cell bodies, and nerve fibers which are running from organ of Carty, they carry the hearing signals. So this layout, it allows the basilar membrane to vibrate differently at different parts, which is enabling the detection of the different sound frequencies. So next is organ of Carty. So organ of Carty, it is located inside the cochlea on the basilar membrane. So what is scala media? This is a central chamber of the cochlea. It is filled with the endolymph. It is a special fluid essential for the hair cell function. So what is the organ of Carty again? It is a hearing organ of the inner ear. It sits on the basilar membrane inside the cochlear duct, and it contains the sensory cells that convert the sound into nerve signals. So now what are the components of the organ of Carty? So the inner hair cells which are IHCs. So this is present only in one row. The main function of inner hair cells is to detect the sound and convert it to the electrical signals to the brain via the auditory nerve. So these are the true hearing receptors. So next is outer hair cells. The shortcut is OHCs. So these are arranged in three rows, which the function is to amplify and fine-tune the sound vibrations. So these outer hair cells, they also help to increase the sensitivity and the clarity of the hearing. So the next is tectorial membrane. So this is a gel-like membrane that sits above the hair cells. So whenever the sound vibrates, the membrane bends the hair cells, which triggers the electrical signals. So what are supporting cells? The last cell, it provides a structure, stability, and also the metabolic symptom or metabolic support. So the basilar membrane. Basilar membrane, it changes in width and also stiffness along its length. So base of the cochlea is narrow and stiff. It detects the high frequency sounds. Whereas apex of the cochlea, it is very wide and flexible. It detects the low frequency sounds. So this is called as the tonotopic organization, which is also called as frequency mapping. And then vestibular apparatus, which is also called as the balance system. So diagrams on the right, they represent the balance organs of the inner ear. So these include the semicircular canals, utricle and saccule. So what are semicircular canals? They are three canals, the anterior, posterior and lateral. So the function of these canals are to detect the angular or rotational movements of the head, such as turning left, right or nodding. So inside each canal, there is an endolymph fluid and a sensory region which is called as the clyster ampullaris, which bends during the movement. So utricle and saccule, these are the otolith organs which detect the linear acceleration and also the head tilt. So the otoliths are shown within the diagram, which are a tiny calcium crystal sits on a gel layer. So when the head tilts or moves, the otoliths shift so that they bend the hair cells and this sends signals to the vestibular nerve. And in this picture, there is a head upright versus head tilted. So this diagram shows the gel and otoliths move depending upon the position because causing the bending of hair cells. So the first is there are three semicircular canals shown in this top left. The anterior semicircular canal, posterior semicircular canal and lateral semicircular canal. So what they detect? They detect the angular movement of the head. So otolith organs here you can see the utricle and saccule. So head tilt, the side tilt, forward or back tilt. So this contain the otoliths which are tiny calcium crystals and otolithic membrane which is a gel layer and also the hair cells. So macula is shown in this picture which is a sensory area inside the utricle and saccule. So it contains the hair cells that detect the head position. Whereas the bottom diagram, it is about the head upright and head tilted. So in head upright, the otoliths sit evenly on the top of the membrane. So hair cells stand straight. You can see in this picture, the hair cells are very straight. So this sends a normal upright signal to the brain. Whereas in the head tilted, this gravity pulls the otoliths to one side. So the otolithic membrane shifts. Hair cells bend, which results in sending a signal showing the direction of the tilt. So each canal has ampulla with crista ampullaris. So what is ampulla? It is a swollen end of each canal. So inside there is a crista ampullaris which is a main sensory receptor. So crista ampullaris, it is a combination of hair cells and also the cupula. So what are hair cells here? This bend when fluid moves during the head rotation. And cupula is a gel-like cap sitting on top of the hair cells. So whenever the head rotates, the endolum fluid moves to the cupula, it bends and then hair cells send these signals. So what is the function of this cupula? To detect the rotational head movements like shaking your head? No. So next structure is utricle and saccule. So these structures, they detect the linear acceleration, nothing but the movement of forward, backward, up and down movement. And also they detect the head position relative to the gravity, which is nothing but the tilting. So each utricle and saccule, they consist of maculae, which is a sensory patch where the hair cells are located. It also contains of hair cells which are embedded inside a gel-like otolithic membrane. And otoliths are nothing but there are the tiny calcium carbonate crystals sitting on the top of the membrane. So what is the extra function? I mean, what is the main function of this macula? It cushions and supports the membranous labyrinth. So the surrounding fluid acts like a sharp observer. It also protects the delicate sensory organs. So now, this is about the anatomy. Now, how the blood supply and nerve supply takes place within the inner ear. So, blood supply, it is done by the labyrinthine artery. So, this is a branch from AICA, nothing but the anterior inferior cerebral artery. So, sometimes directly from the basilar artery. So, it supplies both the cochlear and vestibular system. Whereas, nerve supply is done by the 8th cranial nerve, which has two major branches. The cochlear nerve, which is responsible for hearing, and vestibular nerve, which carries the balance information from the semicircular canals, utricle, and also the saccule. So, this is the anatomy of the inner ear. So, next coming to physiology of the inner ear. So, what are the main functions of the inner ear? So, the first is physiology of hearing, which is a cochlear function. So, the hearing process has two main parts. So, the one is sound transmission, which is a mechanical process to fluid movement. The other is hair cell activation, the fluid movement which turns into electrical signals. So the first is sound transmission. So how sound reaches the cochlea? So sound waves in the step 1, sound waves they enter the external ear which moves through the ear canal, and step 2, the tympanic membrane vibrates. So the eardrum starts vibrating according to the sound frequency. So in the third step, ossicles, these are the 3 small bones which vibrate, so they amplify the sound to make it strong enough to reach the inner ear. So the fourth step is the stapes pushes on oval window. So the footplate of the stapes, they pushes the oval window. This creates a pressure wave with the perilymph of the scala vestibulae, which is a fluid-filled chamber in the cochlea. So the final step is the wave travels through the cochlea. So this mechanical wave, it travels through the cochlea, causing the movement of the basilar membrane. So this is about how the sound transmits. So the second one is hair cell activation. So how sound becomes the electrical signals. So in the step 1, basilar membrane movement bends the stereocilia. So hair cells sit on the basilar membrane. When the membrane moves, the stereocilia bend. So what happens in the step 2? On each stereocilium, tiny connections called as tip-link stretch. So this opens mechanically gated K+ channels. So this potassium channels from endolymph, they flows into the hair cell. So endolymph is unusual because it has high potassium content. So this potassium flows inward, causing the depolarization. So the third step is depolarization of the hair cell. So the cell becomes less negative, it depolarizes, and then this opens into the calcium channels. So in the step 4, neurotransmitter release. So calcium causes the hair cells to release a neurotransmitter, mainly the glutamate cell. So in the step 5, it stimulates the auditory nerve. So the neurotransmitter excites auditory nerve fibers, which are a branch of 8th cranial nerve. So this electrical information is carried to the brain where the sound is interpreted. So this is a physiology of hearing, which is a cochlear function. So next is physiology of balance, which is a vestibular function. So what does semicircular canals do? They detect the rotation, which is an angular acceleration. So the basic concept over here is a semicircular canals. These are the 3 fluid-filled tubes which are arranged at a right angle to each other, allowing the brain to detect the rotation in 3 planes. So what does the horizontal canal do? Shaking head, no. Anterior canal, nodding, yes. And posterior canal, tilting head sideways. So what is the mechanism over here? The first step is head rotates. So where the endolymph lags behind. So the fluid inside the canal, it does not move immediately due to inertia. So this lag, it pushes the cupula in the opposite direction of the head movement. And then this cupula bends. So when the cupula moves, the tiny hairs called as the stereocilia on the hair cells, they also bend. And then these hair cells depolarize or hyperpolarize. So bending towards the kinocilium, depolarization takes place, which increases the nerve firing. If bending away from the kinocilium, hypopolarization takes place, decreasing the firing. So these signals travel via the vestibular nerve to the brain. So the second part is utricle and saccule. So they detect the linear acceleration. So utricle and saccule are also called as otolith organs. So what does they detect? Utricle detects the horizontal movements, whereas saccule detects the vertical movements. So what is the main mechanism over here? The first step is head movement shifts the otolithic membrane. So the membrane is topped with heavy otolith crystals, which are nothing but made up of calcium carbonate. So this otolith weight, it bends the hair cells. So whenever the head accelerates, the crystals lag due to weight and they bend the stereocilia. So this bending, it alters the nerve firing. So the brain interprets it as a linear motion. So what they detect? Linear acceleration and gravity. So the third part is vestibulo-ocular reflex. So what is the main purpose of this VOR? To keep your vision stable whenever your head moves. So for example, when you turn your head left quickly, so this VOR moves your eyes right automatically. So this keeps the image steady on the retina. So why this VOR is important? So without VOR, our vision becomes blurry during the movement. Some people also experience a jumping vision. So this is why vestibulo-ocular reflex is important. So this is about the vestibular function. So this is for today's session. I hope this session has helped you. So in the next session, you will be going to learn about the ICD-10-CM classification for the diseases of ear and mastoid process. Thank you.